దూర విద్యా విధానంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూర విద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ BA, BCom, BSc డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
Hi viewers, on behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University and my own behalf, I welcome you all to this live teleconferencing program on corporate data management. And the corporate data management is the topic chosen for MBA first year students of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, those who are pursuing first semester in first year. And this topic is chosen from the subject Information Technology for Managers, which is one of the course for MBA first semester first year MBA students of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. And friends, today we are here to discuss and learn something about corporate data management as a part of our curriculum at B.R. Ambedkar Open University. And friends, the corporate data management is a concept of organization's ability to create, integrate, disseminate and manage the data for all enterprise applications, processes and entities in order to supply or deliver the IT based applications and software packages as a timely and accurate delivery. And it is also known as enterprise data management, which is a concept which addresses the transmission of different data sets within the processes, applications, and they mostly depends on consumption of these data sets to the complete business processes and transactions. And therefore, we must know why this corporate data management is required. The corporate data management is also known as enterprise data management. The main purpose of this corporate data management is to resolve the organizational issues, conflicts resulting from the mismanagement of information and data, thereby implementing a structured data delivery strategy from data producer to data consumer. This is the ultimate aim of the corporate data management by any corporate companies or individual enterprise business enterprises. So friends, this issue or this topic is for about 40 minutes to discuss, and remaining 20 minutes will be available for you as viewers to interact with us to clarify your doubts, and your doubts must be with related to present topic for which we are discussing today. And this topic covers what is the need for database management, what are the types of database models, what are the functions of database administrators, and also what is data analytics and the stages involved in the process of delivery of database management, right from acquiring, developing to management of database at an enterprise level. To discuss all these aspects, we have two subject experts along with me, and my next my left to is Professor GVKRK Acharyulu, professor at School of Management Studies, Central University of Hyderabad, we also call as Hyderabad Central University, Hyderabad. He is a professor at School of Management Studies in Central University of Hyderabad, and next to him is another expert with us is Dr. Venkata Srinivas Kumar, faculty of same school where Professor Acharyulu is also working, that is School of Management Studies, Hyderabad Central University, Hyderabad. So, friends, before discussing this, I have already introduced the topic which serves the purpose of any corporate companies for recommendation on technical specifications for a technology infrastructure that meets organizational requirements. So, to start with and this program, and I will also request the participants or the viewers who would like to interact with us with this program can use these telephone numbers and ask your questions. The telephone numbers are 040-2703-1431, 040-2703-1432, 040-2703-1433. These are the telephone numbers through which you can interact with the resource persons. And friends, let us start the session or program by asking Professor GVK Acharyulu, Professor of Business Management. Professor Acharyulu, what is the need for database management?
So, the need for the database management is very important, essential in today's business environment. Most of the business organizations or enterprise, their operations are based on data management. And if you look at what is database management, to understand the definition, data management is, according to the Data Management Association, it is actually supervising, developing or controlling the data data assets in the organization across different departments. And when the data is available, how do they manage the data across different functional areas in the organization, and also how effectively and efficiently the data is going to be managed. That is very important, since the organizations are growing and the data accumulation is also increasing faster. So, how do we manage this data, how do we store the data, and how do we access the data, and how do you incorporate the data into the enterprise organization? That is very important. That is why the data management is very crucial. And if you look at the data management is how organization is going to make use of the data to generate profits and reduce costs, and also at the time of and at the same time how it is going to reduce the risks. So, when the data is available, the right data is available at the right time, that leads to better decision making.
What are the benefits out of it while managing database?
So, the benefits of data management is how do you share the information. It is more of sharing of information,
right,
and better sharing of information across the departments, and also the security is going to be enforced. That means, you can say that improved security. So, the data should not go into the hands of wrong persons.
Right.
So, the data is very valuable for the organizations. How data is going to write data to the right person, and data should be reliable. So, for that the data security is going to be ensured, and also at the same time inconsistency of data can be minimized. And when you have a different kinds of employees, employment numbers and all different names of the individual stored at different place and differently, the same name will be there at differently. So, in that case this inconsistency will be that can be minimized in the database and data management.
It will also useful for decision making, no?
Yes, decision making also.
Right. So, Mr. Srinivas, Dr. Srinivas, so what are the various aspects of data security? Because Professor Acharyulu was talking about security is one of the benefit of database management.
Right, sir.
So, what are the various aspects of data security, and what controls are suggested in this regard?
So, interestingly, today if you look at the resources that are related to an organization,
right,
so far we thought that it is only material, money, and the other resources which are very important for the organizations. Today, data has become an important corporate resource.
Correct.
So, interestingly, the value of the data is increasing day by day. Then the relative value, as the relative value of the data is increasing, data security becomes an interesting perspective, because there are two aspects to data security.
Right.
One is related to the physical security of the data, wherever we are storing, whatever the hardware that we are using for the storage of the data. how do we ensure security so that the data is preserved? Because whenever we need data, we should be able to retrieve that data. As we have already seen, data is very important for decision making.
Right.
The second aspect is related to how do you ensure that the security of the data is taken care, in the sense that data is not viewed by people who are not authorized to view it.
Right.
Data is not misused by people who have got access to this data.
Correct.
Or some kind of a malicious attack should not be made on the data, so that it is going to create trouble both for the users as well as the organizations. So, if we basically look at the perspectives of data security, these are the important perspectives related to the data security.
Right.
Now, what can be done related to this?
Right.
As far as the physical security of the data is concerned, there are certain protocols laid down. Say for example, it need not always be because of the malicious attack by someone. An earthquake or floods, they can also basically destroy the data resources available with us.
Right.
So, that is related to what kind of physical barriers you are going to create, so that the data security is taken care of. The second part is related to how do we ensure that someone without a privilege, right, is prevented from actually accessing the data.
Exactly.
The second part is related to how do you ensure that someone is not misusing the data to which the access is there. For example, an employee with a financial institution, he may try to increase his own bank balance because he has got access to the data.
Right.
Now, this has to be prevented. That is where certain security protocols are being laid in order to ensure that this data cannot be misused.
Right.
One of the interesting perspectives here is related to a digital signature. You have both a combination of what is known as a private key as well as a public key.
Correct.
Maybe passwords could be there. One example is, today we see that the first layer of the password is user ID and the password.
Right.
The second layer is related to maybe a one-time password which is being generated.
Right.
So, we are trying to basically increase the security that is there. And the third layer is related to how do you encrypt the data, so that even if someone is able to lay their hands on the data, they cannot be actually able to understand the data and misuse it.
Right.
That is where the encryption part comes to it. So, broadly these are some of the aspects that are related to data security and how organizations are taking steps in order to basically ensure data security.
Right. Thank you very much for giving wonderful information. Let me ask another question to Professor G.V.K. Acharyulu. What is database and what is the DBMS, database management systems?
So,
And how it is different from each other, or we can also call it a traditional file management approach? Can we call it database or database management as a traditional file management approach?
yeah, so the traditional file management system is the starting of database base.
Right.
So, the traditional file management, we have all the data is going to be stored in different files. Suppose if you, for example, if you take employee student database or employee database, so each one, the course wise one file will be there, and admission wise one file will be there,
Right.
and library utilization one file will be there. So, all the files are going to be again written in different programs.
Right.
So, everything is stored independently in different files. But here what happens in the traditional file system,
Right.
so redundancy of data will be there, and also the security is very less, anybody can access anytime,
Right.
and also they can modify it. And also you can have a security part, since the security part is very limited. So, the traditional file system is going to have a lot of disadvantages.
Right.
And also if you look at the traditional part, the main aspect of traditional file system is redundancy is more. Right. The data is more. When the data is stored at multiple, same data is stored at different places, it leads to more memory capacity and also leads to cost. But so, to overcome this disadvantage in the traditional file system, the database has come into picture, where you are going to collect the data in a very systematically, interrelated data, and how do you access and store it and retrieve it.
Right.
In a systematic way. How do you manage the data? That is what database.
So, what is the difference, basic difference between database and database management systems?
Database management system is, it's a program.
Right.
It's a program that you are going to run the program to access the database, and also it's a between the users and application program and database. So, how do you manage the database is
Right.
called database management system.
Okay. So, can I distinguish between this? One database is a base which is created for, and the DBMS system is the enabler to run the database?
Yes.
Can I conclude
Yes.
it
Yes.
this
Yes.
way?
Yes.
So, thanks. And Dr. Srinivas, what are the benefits and applications of DBMS, database management systems? Already we learned what is database and database
Right.
management systems.
Right.
What are the advantages of or benefits of this database management systems and its application part?
Okay. So, looking at your question, sir, there are two parts to it. One is basically what are the benefits, second part is related to the applications.
Right.
Now, if you look at the benefits, as already Professor Acharyulu has said, one is earlier data used to be broken into different pieces and lying in different parts of the organization.
Correct.
Different departments used to have their own versions of the same data.
Right.
That creates a lot of confusion, because one is already we are wasting the space.
Right.
That is redundancy. Second thing is there is an issue related to the integrity of the data, right? Different pieces of these data have to be put together. Interestingly, when we look at database management systems, these systems enable us in terms of overcoming these problems. One is you eliminate the data redundancy. Everyone will have access to the centralized database, which can be accessed for various purposes, right? The customers can access the databases, the suppliers can access the databases, the departments within the organization also can access the database. So, the redundancy part is basically taken care of by the database management systems. And second thing is, when you look at the integrity part of it, that is also taken care.
Right.
And more importantly, when we look at especially the RDBMS kind of an environment, we have a situation called as atomicity.
Right.
That means if you are conducting a transaction, the transaction is either completely conducted or it is not conducted. There is nothing like a transaction getting half conducted.
Okay.
Say for example, if I am trying to book a ticket for a particular transportation, right? So, when I am trying to complete this transaction, either the transaction is completely done or the transaction is not done. It is not being partially done.
Right.
So, we have these kinds of advantages that are related to a database management systems kind of an environment. This is in terms of the benefits.
Okay.
When it comes to the applications, quite interestingly, if you look at the history of database management systems, airline industry was the first industry that started looking at the deployment of databases.
Okay.
Interestingly, we know that earlier, when we look at the manual ticket booking that is there, we had a different kind of a scenario that was there. But whereas, when we start looking at the application of databases today, we find that many kinds of applications have been developed around databases.
Okay.
So, interestingly, this led to a situation where unknowingly we started looking at using databases in our daily life. We may not be directly knowing that we are using a database, but then when we are actually looking at the various applications, for example, we can look at banking as a scenario, which is a best case scenario when we are talking about digital transactions, maybe online transactions, card transactions. We are indirectly basically interacting with the databases. Maybe we are aware or we are not aware that we are interacting with the database, but then we are actually interacting with the database at the back end. This is making things what I call actually happening, in the sense that everyone is getting benefited out of the databases. Maybe if you ask me the application part of it within the organization, when we look at dealing with the employee databases, maybe a large organization that is having thousands of employees, rather than going with the file management systems, I can basically switch on to database management systems, where my payroll management becomes easy for me, my attendance management system becomes easy for me. Similarly, when we look at sales and marketing, with multiple types of products and multiple types of segments of customers, it is easy for me to manage the customer databases as well as the product databases. Similarly, when we come to the production management systems, again databases can be deployed. So, across the organization, almost all the functional areas, we have the application of the databases. In addition to this, when we start looking at the industries, maybe right from airline industry to maybe if you look at our own university kind of a systems, where we have to deal with the student information, we start looking at the application of database management systems. So, in a way I can say that the applications are ubiquitous, they are almost there everywhere, whether we know or not, we are indirectly or directly dealing with the databases.
But each and every department or functional areas of the business organization is useful for this,
right, sir.
Are using it.
Right, sir.
So, Professor Acharyulu, what are the various types of database models available apart from these applications and benefits? What are the models available for business enterprises?
So, these database models, let us look at what is database model. How are you going to store the data in a systematic way, and what kind of structure that is going to be there. So, that structure will tell you about the model. So, basically these models are, there are three models. One model is a hierarchical model. In this model, the concept is parent child. Suppose you have employee and employee details, and employee information will be there. So, employee is a parent, and the corresponding fields are going to be there in the children. Or company is going to have departments, company is going to have employees. So, it is related to one company. So, it is a parent child concept, and it is a hierarchical base, and it is going to be the transactions are going to be from parent to child, and a parent can have more number of children, but children will have only one single parent. That is the concept of hierarchical model.
Right.
Coming to the network model. So, whatever disadvantages are there in the hierarchical model, so that can be resolved with the network model. In the network model, it is many to many.
Right.
Earlier, the hierarchical model is one to many only. So now it is many to many. So the employees may be having different kinds of salary structure and different courses and different departments. So what happens is our students, if you take into consideration students, college is going to have students and different courses. So a student can have more than one course, and a course can be done by more than one student. Like that, many to many relationship will be there.
Dr. Srinivas, apart from this, so nowadays banks and bank customers are having multiple account numbers with different banks.
Right, sir.
So how this application part of DBMS or models that we are using in database management can we address those issues?
So it depends on the kind of the architecture that is used by each of this bank.
Right.
Say for example, if I am trying to find out the similarities among the customers.
Okay.
Okay. Normally, I can't go by the name of a person.
Right.
I can't go by the age of a person because
Right.
this might get replicated.
Okay.
But if, say for example, a governmental agency would like to know the various bank accounts that are managed by the same person,
Okay.
maybe we require what is known as a primary key. That means that a common key that would indicate that the characteristics of a particular record matches with the characteristics of another record. Maybe in this particular case, we can take the example of maybe PAN number.
Okay.
Because since I can have
Right.
multiple accounts in different banks, but when I need to present my PAN number, I need to give the same number.
Correct.
Maybe in this particular case, the PAN number becomes the primary key.
Right.
On the basis of the virtue of a primary key, I can start identifying the commonalities that are there, quite interestingly.
Okay. Then what are the languages that are used while working with the databases?
Acha. Interestingly, sir, so far we discussed about the various methods in terms of what a database is there and how we are going to basically look at the application of the database.
Correct.
But when it comes to basically the usage of the database, there arises two issues, sir. One is how to create a database. That means that I need database at a very simple level. We can understand it as a table with various rows and columns that are there.
Correct.
So, for example, I have an employee ID, maybe employee name, employee age, maybe employee department, employee salary, right? These are the various fields that I need to basically populate.
Right.
So, before I start looking at creating this particular database, I need to have a schema for the database. I need to have a plan for the database. That's exactly where our data definition language, sir,
Okay.
DDL we generally call it as in technical terms, data definition language comes into the picture.
Data definition language.
Data definition language.
Right.
So, that's basically related to how we maybe create the table, how we truncate the table whenever we don't require that part of the table.
Exactly.
So, it is more in terms of how you define an object. In this particular case, again, if you are using a jargon that is related to information system, a table might be called as an object, and then basically we start looking at a data definition language in terms of creating basically a schema for the data that we are storing. But then the other part is related to what is known as data manipulation language.
Right.
One is data definition, the second part is related to data manipulation language.
Right.
So, when we are talking about DML, basically once I have created a table, maybe I need to basically populate this table with various values that are there. So, that is exactly where maybe we use a command like a simple command like insert. Insert is a command that helps me in terms of inserting data into the table. Maybe in certain cases I need to update, say for example, the address of a customer might change over a period of time. That means that I need to update the address field within the table. Maybe there I am going to use something called as an update. Okay. So, interestingly, these two whatever I call as data definition language and data manipulation language, they are a part of a bigger language or a bigger what I call schema called as SQL. Okay. Generally, people call it as structured query language. Okay. SQL is what we try to call it as.
Okay.
So, DDL and DML basically they are part of SQL.
Okay, then Professor Acharyulu, can you please explain the different types of database system architecture? What is architecture and what are the different types of database systems in architecture?
So, these the architecture is how you structure the data,
right,
and how the transactions are going to happen in database. So, if you look at architectures, there are three types of architectures. One is simply a simple directly single server is going to be there, and the server is going to give you different kinds of transactions. So, the single system, a single system independent computer system is going to have a database, and the different clients are going to be connected. Okay. And coming to the second architecture, that is client server system. where you are going to have the client is going to have some requests to the server, and server is going to process the request and give back to the client. So, the programs, application programs are going to be run at the client side, and also the application programs are going to be run at the server side.
Okay.
So, what happens is this kind of client server program is going to be utilized by the SQL statement, again structured query language, and this structured query language is going to be interface for the user and the database. And this client server is going to have the fetching of data is very fast, and also retrieve the data is very fast. That is the advantage of client server, and most of this enterprise they are following client server architecture. And third one is actually we have a distributed data architecture. So, where you are going to have entire data is going to be not in the one particular server, it is going to distribute in the different servers, and whenever one particular system fails, and automatically you can retrieve from the other one. So, you have data backup and recovery will be there, and the organizations are very crucial about, very typical, and they are going to take a critical decision about this distributed database system, where they have interface with the different database at different locations. So, that is why this third architecture is very important, and then the fourth architecture is also relational architecture will be there, where you have different kinds of relations, and this is how the different architectures are going to be.
Yeah, Dr. Srinivas, having understood the different types of database architectures, so before knowing the functions of database administrator, these same all these languages are one and the same for the different organization setup or different sectors, for example, banking, education,
Right.
financial sector or manufacturing.
Right.
So, do we have the same these 4 or 5 languages or models useful for all these, or across the companies can have different types?
This is an interesting question, sir, because if we basically look at the logical perspective of the working of the databases as well as the database environment,
Right.
it remains more or less the same at a basic level, But when it comes to the implementation part, say for example, as you said, maybe a sector like education might have different set of needs.
Correct.
Maybe a sector like energy sector could have different set of needs.
Right.
So, in this perspective, what is going to happen is, even based on the requirements of the customers, the companies that develop these databases, they are going to basically tone down the capabilities of, or
Correct.
tone up even the capabilities of the databases as per the user requirements. So, interesting perspective here is, the logical way of processing data remains the same, but when it comes to the application part of it, based on the independent requirements that are related to the different sectors.
Right.
Say for example, airlines is a part of the transportation system, but maybe at the same time railways is also a part of the transportation system, but both of them may not have the same kind of requirements that are there. So, when it comes to maybe booking a ticket, if I take this example of booking a ticket, at a very fundamental level it is the same. You are booking a ticket on a plane or you are booking a ticket on a train, but then there are various aspects in terms of how this is done, keeping in view of maybe the number of flights, the different types of maybe classes, maybe an economy class or a business class when it comes to the airlines. But whereas when it comes to railways, the questions are different. Which is the class in which I am traveling? I have a second class, I have a first class, I have got maybe a chair car that is available. Right. Is it a middle berth? Is it a lower berth, upper berth? So, this database will be basically made to cater to the end user requirements.
Right.
So, what happens is, before we actually develop a database, the companies, they make a lot of study in terms of understanding what is known as user requirements. The software parlance, we call it as user requirements. So, fundamentally what they are going to do is, they are going to study the existing system, and then they basically come up with a logical system that is equivalent to the manual system.
Correct.
That is exactly where maybe the companies try to give you an automated solution, and then it depends on the kind of the industry
So,
that we are talking about.
We can understand what we can understand from this is architecture role is very significant.
Very significant.
Then what are the functions of database administrators?
So, interestingly, when we look at the functions, sir, earlier we just remarked that data has become a very important corporate asset.
Correct.
So, interestingly, someone has to be there dedicated in terms of managing the data. So, interesting perspective here is, in the context of database management system, we call this person, whoever has been assigned the job of taking care of the database administration, we call him as a database administrator. So, fundamentally speaking, the issue here is, what does a database administrator do? Primarily, he is involved in designing the schema or the layout for the database. That means that right from the start is going to take care of the kind of the design we are going to have for the database. Then he starts looking in terms of what kind of permissions are given to different users. Say for example, some employees might be having the permission to view the data, just to see the data.
Right.
Some employees might be having the permissions to modify the data that is there. This is one perspective in terms of granting the privileges to the users. Sometimes maybe when it is required, this database administrator has to revoke the permissions also. Okay. That is another perspective. But in addition to this, if you look at some of the other interesting aspects related to database administrator, he should also ensure that the database is stable. Certain jobs that are given to the database, they might be consuming higher resources. Okay. They might be having an overall impact in terms of pulling down the overall efficiency of the database. So, somewhere down the line, the database administrator also has a job in terms of monitoring the functioning of the overall database. So, his role becomes very key, because right from the design to maybe finally taking the decisions that are related to giving the privileges to the users, then taking care of the load that is there on the database, everywhere the database administrator is going to have a key role. So, this person's role is going to become very critical.
Can we conclude that the database administrator functions could be not only acquiring, developing, but also to manage the vast data which has been created, developed and manageable things across the different stakeholders of the enterprise or business organization setups. Professor Acharyulu, in this scenario, how is an RDBMS is different from DBMS? Rational database management system is different from database management system.
So,
what is this basically, what are the difference between these two, and how these applications are different from each other to distinguish between these two?
So, the database management system is a set of programs okay, which are going to manage the data in a most effective and efficient manner.
Okay.
And how it is going to manipulate the database, that is for database management system.
Okay.
Coming to relational database management system, so the data is going to be stored in terms of tables.
Okay.
All the data is going to be, all the values, each value is going to be stored in the data table, that is going to have a rows and columns.
Okay.
So, each row is going to represent the field or data content, and the row is going to be record.
Okay.
So, the values are going to be there in the table. So, each row is going to represent one employee's or one student information. So, like that you have different employees history will be there, that is going to be stored in one table. So, since in the relation database management, since the relationships are there, okay, so you can easily access and easily identify, and also the retrieval process is very fast compared to database management system. And if you look at security point of view, that database management system security is limited, but in the relation database management security is row level security is there, and field level security is there, table level security is like that. We have a lot of security is there, and everything is the retrieval process is also.
And Dr. Srinivas, could you please give few more differences between these two, RDBMS and DBMS?
See, essentially speaking, sir, when we look at RDBMS,
because to make it clear to our students, so they may be lacking some basic differences between these two. Okay. So, I would like to throw some light on this. So, how do we differentiate basically these aspects are different from this, which is there in RDBMS and which is not there in DBMS?
Okay, sir.
So, can you please give some?
So, relational database management system is basically one model,
okay,
where we basically focus on the relationships between the what you call various entities that are there. Say for example, sir, if a person is considered as an entity, okay, a person has got a name, a person has got a number. Say for example, if I can take Aadhaar as an example, okay, a person has got a number, a person has got a gender, a person has got a profession, a person has got an address. So, what is going to happen as far as relational database management systems is concerned is, we are more interested in terms of looking at building a model on the basis of the relationship between the entity and its attribute. Okay. Say for example, in this particular case, entity could be maybe a school or a college. What is the name of the college?
One to many.
One to many. In certain cases, it could be one to one also. So, okay, interesting perspective here is, in certain cases, it could be even many to many also. Okay. So, the basic idea here is, if I can take an example of a sales organization, okay, right, sir? We have a situation where a company could be dealing with multiple products, right? A company could be dealing with multiple customers. So, interesting case here is, which customer is buying which particular product. If I need to map basically, right, I am trying to basically find out the relationships between the products as well as the customers. Right. In this particular case, there are only two entities. One is the product, the second one is the customer. Now, I can introduce a third entity called as a salesperson. Which salesperson is dealing with which product and which customer.
Correct.
So, what happens here, the complexity in terms of looking at the relationships is increasing, but RDBMS interestingly gives us a scenario where we can essentially try to look at, with the concept of using what is known as a primary key,
Correct.
we try to look at mapping the relationships between these entities that are present. So, interestingly, that will give us a better insight into the data. It will also reduce the scope of making mistakes. It will also reduce the scope of actually committing some errors, like let us say a customer might be changing his address. In the billing, the address has not been changed, but whereas maybe in the marketing database the address has been changed. Relational database management basically addresses these problems, where it ensures that the integrity of data is present. Maybe we have other types of databases also, like sir said, hierarchical databases are there. In this particular case, there is a parent child kind of relationship, but then it may not be useful in all the cases that is there.
Correct.
RDBMS essentially tries to basically take into consideration the drawbacks that are there with the previous database models, and then it tries to give us a better solution.
So, it is a modification model of DBMS.
Yeah, it is an
RDBMS.
improvement of
that existing one.
basic databases that were there.
Then what is already we have discussed about the languages
Right,
part of it, what type of languages that work with databases.
Right.
Now, what is procedural language and structural query language?
Query language.
And how it is used in data processing?
Right, sir. So, interestingly, when we start looking at this PLSQL is the term that is generally used in this context. PLSQL, if we have to put it very simple, it is an extension of SQL.
Okay.
So, earlier we are talking about structured query language, basically in terms of a data modification or data manipulation, we can call it as well as data definition.
Okay.
But then generally there are procedural languages, say for example, Pascal, Fortran, these are some of the examples of procedural languages.
Right.
What we are trying to do here is, we are trying to incorporate the benefits of a procedural language by getting into PLSQL. So, basically what happens here is, whenever we are trying to look at the data, say for example, one example is related to how do you handle errors or how do you handle exceptions if they occur in the databases. Say for example, I have a database where the age of a person is being shown as negative.
Okay.
Now, this is basically an error that has occurred. Now, somewhere down the line, I need to have a way of basically addressing this particular kind of a problem. So, in order to basically address these kinds of problems, what we have done is, SQL has been improvised by looking at PLSQL, an extension of SQL getting into procedural language, structured query language, that will have the capabilities of the simplicity of SQL as well as the capabilities of procedural language.
PL, okay.
Right. That is how basically we try to improvise the working of the database.
So, Professor Acharyulu, what are the triggers and how do they work in this database management models or approaches?
So, the triggers are play very crucial role in database management system.
What is the term called triggers first?
The trigger is actually a stored procedure, a stored procedure that is going to be, whenever an event is happening, the trigger is going to be fired.
Okay.
So, actually it is a procedure, actually automatically it is going to be fired, and the trigger mechanism is whenever suppose you want to validate the data.
Okay.
So, suppose if you want to, suppose a user is going to enter some data which is not correct, suppose employment number, date format, the date format is not properly selected. So, it is going to give the message, that is a trigger mechanism. So, it is going to lead, it is going to generate some kind of data, and also it is going to validate the user data, and also you have different kinds of triggers. Suppose if you have employment number, so employment number, the employee should not be more than 1. Suppose our employment number should not be null.
Okay.
So, if you enter a wrong data, automatically it is not going to enter into the database. So, the trigger is going to definitely guide you how the right data has to be there in the database. And also if you see the transactions time, suppose you have some of the transactions, if you see an online transactions from morning 7 to evening 7.
Right.
So, if you take up online transaction after 8 o'clock, after 7 o'clock, it is going to give a message, sorry, it is going to only 7 to 7 only. So, this is a kind of mechanism that this is going to give a guidelines to the user, how a data can be given properly.
How these triggers are useful for the database administrators point of view to their respective organizations?
So, interesting perspective here is, sir, say for example, as sir has said, in certain cases maybe wrong data has been entered into the database. Now, what a trigger is doing is, trigger is preventing from the entry of this data which is not needed.
Right.
Suppose if a trigger is not there, this data gets entered into the database. Maybe if some kind of operations are done on the database, it leads to undesirable consequences.
Okay.
And second thing is, because a trigger is there, it is actually reducing the burden of the people who are working with the databases. Rather than committing an error and then actually recovering from it, it tries to minimize the level of errors by trying to prevent it. Because as sir has said, it is a stored procedure that gets activated when a certain event occurs.
Okay.
So, interesting case here is the ability of the people who have designed the database to anticipate the errors that might occur, the kind of situations in which triggers might be required, that will basically help them in terms of incorporating.
So, triggers
the right
identified
kind of
not
triggers.
only preventing from wrong entry, but also correct the wrong entries already done.
That correcting takes time, sir.
Okay.
Right? In the absence of a trigger, that might be required, but a trigger will not allow you to perform
When
certain
we are talking
activities.
about it prevents wrong entry, right? If it is already
Yeah.
entered wrong,
that is
so
where trigger
how
comes.
this trigger going to work?
Then trigger may not be useful, sir.
Okay.
Maybe that has to be found out manually, or when an exception has occurred, the exception handling has to come into the picture.
Okay.
That will actually improve the burden of the database administrator as well as the users.
Okay. Dr. Acharyulu, how do we understand the term called data analytics?
So,
Nowadays, it is a buzzword, right? So,
Yeah.
business context, data analytics, and what are the different types of data analytics?
So, here you have data analytics is really the emerging trend
Right.
in business environment. So, it is very important for a business organization to be successful or to be competitive in the present day situation.
Right.
If you look at data analytics, different source of data is available. In organization, if you look at lot of data is available, lot of data will be flowing. So, how different source of data is going to be managed properly and stored properly, and finally, how do you manipulate this data, and how a meaningful conclusion can be drawn from this data after processing. This is how data analytics. And here if you have in the data analytics part, we have three types of data analytics.
Okay.
Three types are there. One is prescriptive analytics. In the prescriptive analysis, what to be done.
Okay.
So, that is going to be based on the data that is there, and based on that what is going to be done. And if you have a other one, that is predictive analytics. In the predictive analysis, what has to be done in future.
Okay.
So, you have forecasting, you have different kinds of simulation experiments, and all these things will be there. But the descriptive analysis, what is there presently, what is the current status. So, that is what descriptive analytics. So, here what happens is, in the descriptive analytics, you will be looking at all the data and processing the data and finding out what the current status that is going to be there.
Which one is more effective?
Predictive analytics is more effective.
So, is there any other kinds of data analytics according to you, Dr. Srinivas?
So, interestingly, sir, as sir has said, data analytics today is the buzzword.
Yes.
But then when we are looking at data analytics in the current scenario,
Correct.
we understand that data analytics goes beyond the simple data analysis, for the simple reason that data analytics basically is an umbrella term that refers to any kind of analysis, that is related to the data, that will start looking at employing techniques like machine learning in this particular. That is the reason why today when we look at analytics, the question is, how is analytics different from the simple data analysis. Okay. So, when it comes to the basic application part of the analytics, as sir has said, to start with, I have some historical data or I have some current data. I would like to know what is happening. Descriptive analytics is going to help me in terms of understanding this. Say for example, I am trying to find out why something has happened, maybe why something has happened.
Right.
Diagnostic analytics is the term that is used. Correct. Because we are trying to find out the relationship between the cause and the effect that is there. And then as sir has said, predictive analytics is a very interesting perspective where we are trying to look into the future as to what is going to happen on the basis of the data available with us. In addition to this, we also have something known as prescriptive analytics. Okay. So, when we are talking about prescriptive analytics, we are trying to basically look at the application of optimization models, in the sense that given that this is the scenario, what is the right way of approach for me? A simple example is, given that I have the past data related to my advertisement and sales, now what kind of data could be available, or what kind of insight could be available for me, where I try to optimize my advertisement spending so that my sales are going to get maximized. Maybe that we can classify as prescriptive analytics. It basically guides us in terms of what kind of actions need to be taken. So, in a way, these are all interlinked.
How these 3 or 4 different data analytics are useful for different background business enterprises. For example, when you talk about banking,
Right.
manufacturing units, or these analytics works for all these data sets, or different approach will be used for different sectors.
Okay. Interestingly, sir, there are various procedures as well as algorithms available when it comes to the data analytics scenario.
Okay.
But then the most interesting part is the quality of the data that is there with us. Because if the quality of the data that is available with the organization is not up to a great level, then using bad quality data, we cannot use it for right kind of a decision making. So, interesting perspective here is when we start looking at the applications of this in various sectors, right. Once the data is available, a simple case, since you are talking about multiple what you call industries,
Right.
maybe for a healthcare scenario, a question could be like this: if a patient is discharged today, what is the probability that the patient gets admitted within a week?
Right.
So, at the time of discharge itself, if we have this kind of an information,
Correct.
a better decision can be taken. Now, say for example, from the production scenario, if I am producing this product, what is the probability that this product might get sold within 2 weeks?
Right.
So, interestingly here data will help us in terms of taking a decision, and multiple models as well as algorithms are available for us to take effective decisions, sir.
Dr. Acharyulu, what are the various applications of data analytics available for this business world today?
If you look at a business organization, the organization, if you look at the applications are like in the business functions,
Okay.
like marketing analytics, finance, financial analytics, and production analytics, and also you have HR, human resource management, HR analytics, like that you have different analytics. Suppose if you look at HR analytics, so looking at the employees, the salary package and all these things, nowadays the attrition rate is very high. So, when the employee is going to leave the organization, that you can predict.
Right.
It is a predictive analytics. And suppose if you say what kind of compensation plan you can devise, that is also part of this predictive analytics.
Okay.
And if you look at marketing analytics, so sales of products, what kind of sales will be there in future, and current situation, whether it is going to be 10% increment will be there or 20% increment will be there. And if you look at the regions, sales people, what are the targets, whether they have reached the targets or not, how they are going to reach the targets. All these things can be found in the marketing analytics. And if you look at supply chain or production analytics, in the supply chain vendors, how vendors are going to supply, when the vendor is going to discontinue from supplying the material, and also how you are going to plan your production systems, production plans, all these things are part of your supply chain analytics. And if you look at the financial analytics, finance, so what is the credit limit that you can give, whether when is the investor is going to default, all these things are you can predict in beforehand based on the transactions, based on the behavior of the customers, based on the behavior of the respondents. So, this is how the different kinds of.
But having all these things, business entrepreneur or business promoters can know what is the future of their business. Then what is the role of uncertainty or risk? So, how these risks are going to be addressed by the application of database analytics?
So, interestingly, sir, if you look at the mitigation of risk
Correct.
using
Yes.
analytics, one scenario is the scenario in any business is dynamic.
Right.
I can't take decisions based on the data that is available to me some time back. Maybe right now the model is working, but as we start implementing the solutions, maybe situation might change.
Yes.
So, what happens here is we have a cyclical scenario where continuously we keep on getting the data and trying to get insights into the data and then deploying it in the market and trying to find out whether it is working or not.
Right.
And second thing is when we start looking at the applications of the models have got their own limitations. Okay. That is exactly where a model might tell you in terms of what kind of scenario could be there, but then when it comes to the decision making, finally a human being has to take. Of course, today we talk about artificial intelligence kind of technologies that are able to take decisions by themselves, but at the same time when you start looking at the decisions that need to be taken by the managers, still the human decision making is still superior compared to that of machine decision making.
In spite of all these applications and databases.
Things, because the data can give you an insight based on which what kind of decision has to be taken, this final call has to be taken by the manager himself.
Right. So, still risk is
risk is still there. We can't have a scenario where there is a 0% risk, but then the scenario could be that those companies that are capable of using data versus those companies that are not capable of using data, that is where the line of distinction comes.
In this context, what is a big data?
So, when we look at this data which is known as big data, interestingly data itself is big, but today again when we start looking at various kinds of magazines, journals, we start looking at this term called as big data.
Okay.
Simply put, sir, big data is a term that is used to address the data which is very complex, which cannot be handled by the conventional computing systems that are available.
Okay.
So, what is this complexity?
Shall we call it big data is nothing but a comprehensive data?
A complex data, we
Complex
can call it as. A complex data which cannot be handled by the traditional computing systems. Because we need to have a different kind of a system.
What are its features or characteristics?
So, for us, sir, interestingly, IBM scientists have given a few characteristics that are related to the data. These are basically what are known as volume of the data, velocity of the data, veracity of the data, and variety of the data.
Okay.
What it simply means is that this data is huge, sir. The kind of data that we are going to deal with is very huge. That is the reason why we call it as voluminous data.
Right.
Maybe people talk about a quintillion bytes of data, 1 followed by 18 zeros is basically the size of the data that is there. So, that is one aspect that is related to the volume of the data. Maybe traditional computing systems may not be able to handle this kind of data. The second part is related to the velocity of the data, sir. The rate at which the data is entering into the organization. As you start looking at various people who are browsing across the world, imagine at the backend servers the amount of data that is getting generated. Correct. That is basically related to the velocity of the data. Then the third one is related to what is known as variety of the data. Today, if you look at the social media environment
Correct.
from a user perspective,
exactly.
we post pictures, we post videos, we post music,
text.
that is songs.
Text.
We also use text files. So, interestingly, there is no uniformity in the data. Earlier, when we are talking about a database management system, we are saying neatly there is a table that is present,
right.
There is a number that is there is a name that is there,
Correct.
but here the data is having a lot of variety that is there.
Unstructured one.
Unstructured one, completely unstructured, as you rightly said,
right.
Especially when we look at text data, text
Right.
data is completely unstructured, there is no structure that is present. And finally, veracity of the data. What is the quality of the data that is available with me? Is it genuine or not? If I am trying to take a decision related to, on the basis of this particular data, is this data dependable or not? So, these 4 ways basically they define the various what you call dimensions of big data, sir. That is how basically we start looking at addressing big data.
Professor Acharyulu, can you please explain the different stages in performing analytics related to big data, what we are talking about so far?
Dr. Srinivas said that big data is actually a large database like customer relationship management, supply chain management, production materials management. So, all the large different types of data is going to be stored at one place, and that is going to be big data. And here, how do you implement this big data? So, if you look at, you have to, the first step is you have to look at a problem statement. For what purpose you are going to do, and what kind of benefits that you are going to draw, and what is the cost effectiveness. Everything you have to look at. Then once you know, once you define the problem statement clearly, then you have to look at how do you, who are the people to human resource assessment, who are the people to do, and who are the people involved in this implementation of the big data. And then after that, if you look at right people, right job, that is fine. If at all, if you need some people, you have to give training, or you have to recruit some people. So, that is what human resource requirement. Then third part is data acquisition. What kind of data that you are going to get, and the right data or relevant data, that is very important. So, once you acquire the data, then you have to clean the data. So, after acquiring the raw data from different multiple sources, then you have to clean the data.
What is business intelligence? Nowadays, everybody is talking about it.
This is an interesting term, sir. In fact, I can say that business intelligence is an umbrella term which basically relates to the competencies of an organization in terms of basically generating queries and getting the answers for them. So, when it comes to managerial decision making, whatever the back end processes are there, ultimately we need to have a system that is capable of basically giving us maybe reports, ad hoc reports, basically for reporting purpose that is there. Maybe these days one more popular application of business intelligence is the dashboards. So, for example, my customer age groups, right? The number of customers I am having in different parts of the country. So, on a map I will be able to visualize basically data visualization in this particular context. So, business intelligence is mostly related to these aspects of helping the manager with decision making by report generation as well as data visualization.
What is data warehouse nowadays?
So, data warehousing is actually it is querying and analysis part, report.
Okay.
How do you generate?
After generating report, you have to start working on warehousing?
Through warehousing, we have to generate report,
Generate the data,
through
okay.
query process.
Right.
So, it is basically how do you analyze the data
Okay.
from multiple resources and how you are going to process the data, and then finally, you have to retrieve the data through SQL language. And this when you are giving a query, then how are you going to generate reports, different
Okay.
kinds of reports.
Okay.
That is how the data warehousing is going to be.
Dr. Srinivas, what is the term cloud computing?
Okay,
please.
cloud computing is also one of the latest terms which
Yes.
is related to the emerging trends in computing as well as in business, sir.
Okay.
So, the basic idea of cloud computing is something like this, sir. Traditionally, companies used to buy various types of software, essentially hardware,
Correct.
in order to manage their data requirements, right?
Right.
Interestingly, today we have a scenario where almost everyone is connected over the internet. So, what companies do in certain cases is the service provider is going to host the services on the internet or on the cloud.
Okay.
So, interestingly here the users, maybe the other companies that require these kinds of services, they need not buy these softwares. What they can do basically is they can basically use this and pay depending on their usage. So, for example, one common example related to cloud computing is a software as a service.
Right.
So, when you look at a software as a service platform, the software is basically hosted by the companies on the cloud or on the internet.
Can we term it as a single application or package can be used by multiple users?
Single application in the sense it depends in terms of how the host company is actually giving.
For instance, I want to take one single internet connection and can be used by multiple.
Not like that,
Is
sir.
it not cloud computing?
May not be, because the reason here is, say for example, you are using your mail,
Right.
or you are using, you are storing your data,
Okay.
may not be on your computer,
Okay.
but on the space that is hosted by a service provider,
Okay.
right? Service provider is going to charge you based on the amount of data that you are using, as well as the amount of time period that you are using the service.
So, all these applications are more relevant in the context of business development.
Definitely,
And
sir.
nowadays, most of the business organizations, whether large size organizations or small in nature, all are making use of this business analytics and database management systems.
Right, sir.
So, what is your suggestion to new entrepreneurs or what you call one person OPC companies, or we can also say that startup companies?
Right.
All these analytics and DBMS software are useful, or they have separate packages to start with?
Okay. Basically, it depends on the kind of the
Business.
mission and vision statement of the organization, sir. And basically, wherever, first thing is the person has to identify the areas where
Right.
the applications of this databases or the applications of data analytics is required.
Yeah.
And once this is done, they can go ahead.
Due to time constraint, we are unable to go ahead, and to conclude, we have been discussing here about database management, or popularly known as corporate database management, for the purpose of MBA students of BR Ambedkar Open University. After having all this discussion over, I think that we have tried our level best to reach the learner friends, and with these few remarks, I would like to conclude the session by thanking both the resource persons and also the technicians. Thank you one and all.